Hi, I'm LadyJenevia. Today's video is a spoiler review of Dickinson Season 3, Episode 8, entitled, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun. I'm recording this video in a bit of a rush because at the time of recording, I have exams coming up next week, but by the time I publish this video, I should be done for the quarter, so that's a nice thought, at least for me. Time of recording this. Now that episode 8 has finally aired, I can freely share that this was the episode with my favorite Emmy Sue moment of season 3. I know that if you want to argue semantics, some might not consider this to be an Emmy Sue moment because this Sue that we're seeing isn't actually Sue, but a version of Sue that exists in Emily's mind. But I would counter that point by noting that Ella Hunt had to put on her cute little suit, get her hair done, learn the choreo to do with Hailee for this scene, and even though when I'm recording this episode has not aired yet, I would bet that when this review goes live, the Dickinson fandom will be posting that scene all over social media. They're going to make edits out of it. They're going to put that footage in their fan cams. They're going to make fan art of it. Dickinson is one of the only shows where you can do something this cool and creative and unique. It's that type of surreal, experimental, visual storytelling that maybe you would see more of in music videos because those can be more aesthetically driven, whereas traditional filmmaking can tend to be more matter-of-fact in presenting a narrative. Experimenting with form in this way is not inherently given in the film medium. I know I said last week that I'm going to be doing a video more thoroughly discussing certain facets of the Emmy Sue arc of this season after all of the episodes have aired, but one thing I will point out now that this scene has finally aired, I've seen some fans of this show tweeting that Elena Smith, the Dickinson showrunner, has used the expression, I believe, spiritual marriage. With these outfits, does this not look like the closest thing you'll get to an Emmy Sue wedding or a first wedding dance? Seeing as how it's a period piece and these characters are based on real people who were not historically shown to be married in real life, it's not a bad way to use that experimental, surrealist approach to form to get these moments and visuals in without completely abandoning the historical canon. I know I've just gone on an entire tangent without going through other things in a more orderly fashion. So let's take it back to the do not reveal list of spoilers. For episode 8, the things that press were not supposed to reveal are Sue secretly submitting Emily's poem to the Drumbeat magazine, and the fact that Henry survives the battle. Emily's journey really comes to a head in this episode. You can see how this is when she is starting to crack under the pressure of trying to do anything and everything for everyone else. She's been trying to play peacemaker for this entire season. She's been trying to fix the fractures in her family. Lines were drawn, she chose a side, and she chose wrong. Where to begin? Austin doesn't want to go to Fraser's funeral, which I really didn't have a problem with that decision. Grief is incredibly subjective, and compounding the trauma of losing a friend to war with the trauma of everything else he's had to experience with his family, I think it's perfectly valid for him to just stay at home. Be a stay-at-home father. There's something really poetic about that cyclical experience of mourning the loss of one friend while being able to experience the incandescent joy of bringing this new life into the world and getting to be present both physically and emotionally for his baby. Austin has been an unexpectedly interesting character to watch across these seasons. He definitely struggles with a lot of things in his personal life and the larger societal expectations placed on him of how he should be a man and be successful professionally, be a provider, when Austin in actuality has a lot more emotional depth, particularly towards fatherhood. I really want to emphasize how much I've enjoyed the arc between Austin and Sue this season as new parents and having to work through those archaic ideas about what their respective duties are as parents. We get to hear Sue say in this episode that Austin is the one staying home watching the baby, and that she and Austin have officially dispensed with predetermined gender roles in their household. That's wonderful. I saw some chatter of people who were questioning how quickly the Sue and Austin conflict was resolved, but to that I would have to ask, why is it bad to have a real human disagreement and be able to resolve that without dragging it out for months or years within the show's timeline? I don't know how viewers experience human conflict, or in a more gentle way of putting it, disagreements. For me as a viewer, it didn't feel unrealistic to see a disagreement arise and to talk it out, after which the issue is resolved. If Emily and Sue are each other's great epic love, I would argue that this baby is Austin's greatest love in his life. I'm not saying that Sue doesn't love her child, but I think that the show has made a point of presenting how Austin always wanted to be a father, and how so much of his energy and what drives him as a person is his love for his baby. He dodged the draft specifically because he wanted to be there to raise this baby. Anyway, I already know some of you want me to get onto other characters because you're not a huge fan of Austin. There's not really much I can get into about Emily and Sue as a pairing outside of Emily's dream sequence, since that's the only space that those performers get to directly interact with one another. However, Sue taking this action on her own of reaching out to get Emily's work published, this is an important development between them, even if Emily is not directly in that part of the scene, because Sue has been acting out this season about Emily's poetry. She reacted very badly to Emily corresponding with Higginson about her poetry. I personally was not a fan of that behavior, but look, she's coming back around. She needs to recognize that Emily has said that she loves Sue. Sue doesn't need to worry about her talking to other people about her poetry, letting other people read what she writes. If you want to be with an artist, don't demand that they keep the art to themselves if that's not what they want to do. That's completely antithetical to creating art. Maybe not everything you make is with the intent of putting it out to a giant audience, but a fair bit of it is meant to reach people outside of yourself. And that is why I love seeing Sue let go of that toxic negative energy. Being a supportive spiritual wife, it sets these two back on the path towards reconciliation, being able to resolve their previous disagreements. I know some people just wanted it to be all sunshine and flowers for Emmy Sue this season, but how do I say this delicately? A lot of married couples fight at one point or another. Speaking of flowers, let's get to the mess. That one line where Edward Dickinson says to Emily that he liked the daffodils because they kept nodding their heads and that they were most agreeable, that was when I responded with red flag when I was taking my notes when rewatching the episode. It's symbolic of how he's finally able to connect with Emily and have what seems like a great relationship with her, but only under the condition that she's just smiling and nodding and listening to him. Being perfectly agreeable can win over loads of people, sure, but what happens when the person you're agreeing with is wrong, or when they are royally screwing you over? I would be curious to know how many viewers did a 180 watching this episode from the Austin-Emily argument to when everything went wrong with their father. Austin said to Emily at the beginning of the episode that she used to be so unconventional and now she's just like their father. Is he wrong? She was going along with so much of what he wanted and valued. If you don't think that Austin was right, I will remind you that Emily herself said that Austin was right. See, this is why you need to watch yourself around old, traditional patriarchs. He was out here luring Emily into a false sense of security, even though the red flag was right there. He liked the flowers because they were nodding their heads and being agreeable with him. If this was a conversation in real life. That could be a completely innocuous comment, but this is not real life. This is a fictional TV show where writers meticulously plan the lines that are said by the characters. And especially on a show like Dickinson, there is no way that line is an accident. Clearly, it's symbolic of where Edward and Emily's relationship was at that point, before the truth came out. Emily blew up at her father, as she should, because he's a scrub for not giving her her fair share of the inheritance, as he should. And she let him know that he is nothing but a scared sheep with no imagination. Exactly. We don't want scrubs in this household. Leave. I don't want to drag too much else out about the fight, but I do want to highlight one other detail before we get to the big dream sequence again. When Emily is running out of the house after ripping Edward a new one, exactly as he deserved, she encounters Betty. Essentially what happens is Betty tells Emily off because Betty is reeling from the discovery about Henry now being a soldier, being in far more danger than she thought he would be. I really appreciated this exchange because it in many ways runs parallel to the confrontation we previously saw between Henry and Higginson, where Higginson was saying that he was having a really hard time and he wishes he could just go back to his old life of working at a newspaper and advising poets, while Henry is out here fighting to have even just the opportunity to get a fraction of what Higginson is able to have in his life. The stakes for them were completely different. And in both of these exchanges, what is happening is you have two white characters being told in so many words to check their privilege. What I appreciate is not just the fact that they're being told to check their privilege, but the fact that they never say in these exchanges direct mentions of, I'm this ethnicity, you're this ethnicity. Sometimes when you have fiction created by white storytellers who want to address things like racism and privilege, it can get at best clumsy and at worst tone deaf, ignorant, and offensive in its execution. Exchanges like these don't require the characters to be that ham-fisted in their delivery of what they're addressing. The implication and the subtext is very clear. Betty is telling Emily off because even though Emily is perfectly valid in her frustrations with her father, and she should be able to express her discontent with any of these people in her close interpersonal relationships that she's having disagreements with, she should also still remember that she does live with privilege. Part of that is because she's a white woman from a family that's pretty well off, but also she is privileged because none of her family is in the level of immediate danger that Henry is in. Now, the final point is Emily spending time with Fraser and him leading her into this new dream sequence. I don't know how all of you are feeling, but I want to take a moment to say that I really like Fraser and what he brings to the show. When he first started popping up in season 2 as nobody, I never would have expected that he would be this vehicle for so many interesting things. It's a fascinating way of writing this part of the Dickinson world. We've had death as a recurring character, and we had that seance in season 2, but Fraser, aka Nobody, being this supernatural force really opens up the show in a unique way. So Emily roasts her dad. Seriously, if she had roasted him any harder, it would have been a barbecue. Betty roasts Emily. So Emily is out here driving the struggle bus right into the forest, and she's going to descend into Dante's Inferno. Cool. Love it. As a larger concept, this nightmare sequence really reminded me of some of the differences you'll find between storytelling in books versus storytelling in films. If Emily was a protagonist in a book and she was feeling emotionally distressed, conflicted, and tormented by the stress of trying to be a war poet, her relationship woes with Sue, the disagreements with members of her family, we would read her inner train of thought through the written words of the author. In the film medium, oftentimes expressing those inner emotions and that type of inner dialogue doing that has to be achieved by several different people, and sometimes you only get a fraction of the information you would get in a book, and you as the viewer often have to interpret the subtext of a certain look, the nuances of what's going on for these characters beneath the surface. So what this nightmare sequence ends up doing is playing out that inner monologue in a really artistic way, the way that you would be able to read someone's inner train of thought in a book. This nightmare sequence is showing all of these different things in Emily's life that she is worried about. What are her fears? What is the worst case scenario for each of the relationships in her life? Her father has been ill, so what would happen if he just all of a sudden dropped dead? Visiting that asylum has left this lingering anxiety. What if her being different than what society wants a woman to be results in her being committed? It would hurt so much more if Austen were to be the one to do it, because even with the disagreements they've had, she still loves her brother. She just had this lovely exchange with Lavinia in episode 7, where she is accepted for who she is, an 1800s sapphic poet. But what if that support were to be taken away? What if even Sue, of all people, turned against her? All of these things are Emily's worst nightmare. What she fears is losing the people she loves. Also, side note, when Emily said, "You're putting words in my mouth," and then Sue said, "Let me put something else in there," I had to laugh because I knew that it would induce meltdowns on the Bird app. Such fun! Anyway, I know that there are fans that have been frustrated with the conflicts between Emily and Sue this season, but to that I would point out, since it's related to the inclusion of this giant nightmare sequence, the show is clearly going out of its way to explain that Emily is under so much stress and pressure from trying to play peacemaker and deal with all of her own personal things internally. And when you are stressed out, it can have a negative impact on your ability to function at optimal levels, whether it's for your work, for Emily that would be her poetry, or in your personal relationships. Stress can build on top of itself and spread like a poison. It's not just some abstract idea. It's doing things to your brain and your body on a biochemical cellular level. It's easy for us as viewers to look at things from the outside and say, this fight is silly, relax, get over it, kiss and make up. But think about the times where you have been really upset and stressed out in your life. Has anyone ever tried to tell you, relax, calm down, it's not that serious, when you're really not in the mental or emotional space to hear it? Emily has to work through these emotions and go on this journey within herself to hopefully come out the other side of it better off. I'm pretty sure I tweeted something before season 3 started airing about how Emily would be struggling this season, or that she would be going through it. And now you can all see what I meant by that, but I think there's something to be said for how cathartic it can be to watch characters struggle if at the end of it, they're able to overcome those struggles. Emily gets reminded that there are much bigger battles being fought than the arguments she has had with her loved ones. She gets to see this fight play out on the battlefield where Henry is fighting alongside his students/fellow soldiers against Confederates, and she calls out to Henry, telling him, "Your family needs you." It's poetic, no pun intended. Hopefully now Emily can learn to just cherish her life as it exists around her and appreciate the people and relationships that she has. And then we'll all be able to get to episode 9. If you think it's weird that my favorite Emmy Sue moment was from a nightmare sequence, that's fine. But listen, I love when Dickinson dabbles in the weird side of its universe. I love the whole concept of what they did with that scene, of how even in Emily's darkest inferno, the brief moment she finds of peace, the eye in the storm, was a wedding dance with Sue. Feels like an Emmy Sue scene to me. Also, just on a superficial level, I love the outfits, I love Sue's hair, and I love the whole production design and the lighting. Listen, it was a vibe. That's going to be it for this video. I wrote and filmed this in a rush. If you have not already, please make sure you check out my interview with Ilda Mason. She is one of the actresses from Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Also, keep an eye out for my spoiler-free video about episode 9, which I should be posting very soon. See you in the next one. Bye.